Hi, everybody. Welcome. Glad to have you once again for one of our programs. I'd like to just alert you that this coming Tuesday, we have another good program. Martin Kent Miller will be presenting Let's Get Social. If, like me, you're a member of a certain generation, you might not be using social media as fully as you could to enjoy your hobby. And Martin is going to give us some tips on how to get more from our social media experience. I'm going to feel like the public television person, but if you're with us for our program today and you've attended other programs and you've not yet joined ATA, I'd like to invite you to go to our website, look at all the benefits of membership and join. It's quick, it's easy. I promise you will be delighted with the additional benefits that you will get as an ATA member beyond just all of these free programs, which we do plan to continue to offer. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Broadhead. Tom is second vice president of the American Topical Association and serves as our fundraising chair, takes on many, many other jobs also with ATA. He's a leader in the Knoxville Philatelic Society, Knoxville, Tennessee. He's a past NoxPEX show chairman and has been their newsletter editor for 15 years. He's the director of the French and Colonies Philatelic Society and an exhibitor mostly in the area of French philately. He's the past vice president of the Southwest Federation of Stamp Clubs. Eric, I almost said your group. Tom is a gifted speaker and writer who very generously shares marvelous programs with us. If you are somewhere where it's cold and snowy today, I'd like to invite you to relax and enjoy a trip with Tom to Paris in 1925, where I'm sure the weather is better than it is where you are. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dawn. And it's great to see everybody here. I hope you enjoy my presentation and look forward to having your questions later. So we're going to take a little visit to Paris in the spring through the fall of 1925. And during that time, Paris was the host of a modest-sized World's Fair, the Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes, and the International Exposition of Decorative and Modern Industrial Arts. So this is, as an Art Deco, of course, which you may be familiar with that term, that's a term that was actually coined by a writer for the Times of London in, I believe it was 1969. So it was sometime afterwards before the term Art Deco was coined for popular use. There were no, unlike many other international expositions in Paris, there were no permanent structures left from the Art Deco exposition. And so these souvenirs that we have of it, and here we see a photo postcard of a souvenir stand at the exposition. We have postcards and we have stamps and other philatelic items, pieces of art, and sculpture, but no permanent buildings. So a little unusual from that. And so let me tell you a little bit about the events leading up to it. In the early 20th century, as Art Nouveau was kind of passing on, French became concerned that they were losing their foothold as the arbiters of good taste and art. And so they began planning for an international exposition that would highlight their position in the developing world of modern art. Well, there were financial problems, and then World War I came. So then the recovery after World War I again delayed the plan for this international exposition until finally in 1923, it was authorized by public law, and but the nation decided not to provide funding for it. City of Paris did provide the land for it, but there was no public funding for the exposition. So they issued revenue bonds. And these are fairly common and easy to find, very decorative, as you might expect. And of note is that Fernand David was the commissioner for the exposition. He was also a senator, French senator, and a former minister of public works. So very accomplished government leader. Once it was approved, then the publicity for the exposition began in the middle of July in 1923, almost 2 full years before. And there were several different commemorative postmarks. The one in the middle is the most common one. This was in use from July 1923 through the end of 1925. The other two shown here were only used in Strasbourg and in Rennes. All the others were of this similar kind to the one shown in the middle. So a number of different cities in France utilized these postmarks, and the city of Paris had 6 different ones related to different post offices. So the word was out, and then we get to postal markings at the actual exposition, and the same slogan cancel that had been in use since mid-July 1923 was also used at the exposition post office, which is shown in the postcard to the left. Now, there's something very unusual about this, because if you have ever been to France, or especially Paris, the concept of a standalone post office is almost unheard of. Post offices are usually a little kind of what we would call a hole in the wall. And so this was quite a note at the exposition, that they were standalone post office. Unfortunately, the slogan cancel that they were using there, I have yet to find, after looking at dozens of examples, yet to find one that really has a clear printing of the slogan cancel. And I keep trying to find earlier and earlier ones, and have not had any luck, but really peculiarly, because some of the other cities, their cancels were good for, almost, for a good 2.5 years. But at the exposition post office, they also had a hand cancel, which is shown in the lower right. And then the other little straight line marks, those we see on registry labels. So you could send registered mail from the exposition post office and the registry label, rather than a number or a post office for the location had one of these exposition Arts Décoratifs Paris. Okay, so we're going to have an international exposition, and now, in addition to the postal cancels, we want to have some stamps. And so Commissioner General Fernand David then proposed that that there be a budget for the printing of stamps that would be supported through the budget of the exposition. So he's promising that, hey, don't worry, folks, the profit that we make from this exposition will pay for the stamps. Now, if you know anything about World's Fairs and how profitable they are or aren't, then this whole promise comes back a few years later in the form of lawsuits. So in 1924, they adopted a proposal to have stamps that was signed into law by President Milleron in 1924, with 5 different denominations proposed that were to be used for the common postal, both domestic and UPU international rates at that time. But from the time that that these stamps and a postal card were authorized until they were issued, postal rates had increased. So, and then during the exposition, rates increased again. So the earlier postal rates for printed matter, 5 centimes in mid-July during the exposition, doubled to 10. The UPU printed matter went from 10 to 15 to 20. The proposed letters actually stayed at 25 and then jumped to 30. Postal cards, 30 to 45 to 60, and then UPU letters, 50 to 75 to 1. So the actual denominations of the stamps are shown below. So we have a 10 centime here, a 15 centime here, 2 different 25 centime stamps for letters, a 45 centime postal card, and then 2 different designs for 75 centime UPU letter rate. The only one that corresponds with any of the later rates is the 10. They didn't do anything with the others. And so you end up with some kind of interesting makeup rates. Well, they held a design competition for these decorative art stamps. And these are 4 of the essays that were among the more highly rated examples. The first winner, or the first prize and the winner, was Edmond Becker's Potter Decorating a Vase. There were other allegorical ones, like Liberty. This was the second, another Becker, and yet another Becker design. And so the first place was the Potter Decorating the Vase. And then it became a matter of like, okay, now how are we going to print these things and in how many colors? And David requested recess engraving. I mean, and it really is a beautiful stamp. This is a proof that was done, recess engraved. And then heliogravure was also tried out. Up to that time, really all French stamps going back to 1849, the earliest, had been by typography, with a couple of exceptions that were lithographed. And it was determined that recess engraving was too expensive, and heliogravure was a little too experimental at the time, so they went with typography. Here's a proof with 3-color typography, but they decided that 2-color typography would be the printing method for the Potter stamps. And so the first stamps issued in December of 1924 included 25 centime and 75 centime values using the Potter design of Becker. And the printed sheets looked like this. You had 6 panes in 2 columns that were arranged tête bêche, in other words, head to foot. These are all flat plate printed, so they went into the press, printed one side, they were turned around 180 degrees and printed the other one. And these are all also referred to as windmill printings because of the rotation of the sheet that was required. The next thing was that the sheets were cut into 2, and then they could be, and then they were gummed. The green line here indicates the area on the reverse that was gummed. Later, they could be split into separate panes of 25. And each sheet also had numbers and perforations in the selvage that represented paper control perforations, the press operator, and the date. So it's interesting that you can actually determine the date that a particular example was printed, and then a press number. Perforating was done with a comb perforator. So they start at at the top of one of these sheets and just ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk all the way down. So the bottom selvage is perforated, the top selvage is not perforated. And this resulted occasionally in errors where the comb perforator would miss the first row of stamps. So here's a corner pair that is in with the top one imperforated on 3 sides. Okay, so as I mentioned, the design by Becker was adopted as a result of this design competition. And for the 25 and 75, these occur in sheets of 3 panes of 75 stamps. And of the 25 centime value, there were more than 124 million printed. Unfortunately, there is no distinction between how many of each of the 2 designs were one or the other, and the same thing with the 75 centime value. Some of this is the result of a visit that I took to Paris and working in the library at the Musée de la Poste that had a lot of additional original documents and also correspondence. So here's an example of the 25 centime with a first day cancel, 7th of December, 1924. But one thing I want to mention here is notice it says demonetized December 31st, 1925. And all of the decorative art stamps were demonetized at the end of the year in 1925. This is not unique because the previous year when France hosted the Paris 1924 Olympics, the Olympic stamps were demonetized at the end of 1924. Not sure why they thought that was a necessary thing to do or even a good idea, but they did. There is a variety that I have found in the Potter designs, and that is that above the word arts in the lower left of the stamp, there is a dot of color that shows up in this one place. Unusually, varieties are very unusual in these stamps, and in fact, most of the designs do not even have varieties. But this was one that I, after having collected a lot of singles and blocks and panes, noticed this this little blip here. that actually occurs in about half of the stamps in every pane. There's some other varieties in the Potter stamps. One that used to be in the catalogs was one, you see he has 3 fingers on the base, and with a little bit of a leftward or downward shift of the background, it covers up one of his fingers. And so 2 fingers on the vase for a long time was considered a variety, but it no longer is. It's just an incidental printing, not really a major color shift. And then here's a possibly unique example. This is the only thing I'm showing you that is not part of my collection. This was one that was offered for about 20,000 euros a few years ago, where a stray piece of paper landed on the stamp after the frame had been and vignette had been printed and before the background. So really a spectacular example, but I don't own that one. There's some other varieties with the Potter stamps: misperforated, rough perforations. And in 1937, during the Philatelic Exposition then, they were, stamps up to that time had been printed by flat plate, and they began to experiment with rotary press printings. And so for some reason, they decided to try out the Art Deco stamps to see if they could be printed by rotary press. And fairly successfully. You'll see that the centering of the denomination wasn't always really great. This one, which is very similar in colors to the actual stamp from 1925, the kicker that this is definitely a rotary press is the selvage here with the diagonal bars, which is characteristic of French typographed rotary press printings. Okay, so here we are with this fairly attractive Potter designing a vase stamp. But then Fernand David decided, like, no, one design is not enough. We must have more. And so he proposed 4 additional designs. And there was no competition for these as there had been for the Potter design. And in fact, the designers of a couple of these were personal friends of Fernand David. So, so all of a sudden we come up with a proposal for 4 more designs. One of them, a torch Le Flambeau, one, a pot of flowers, Le Pot de Fleurs, and one called La Femme et la Biche, a woman and a deer, and the other, L'Architecture. And 3 of these were actually utilized, were actually printed, the Flambeau, Pot de Fleurs, and L'Architecture. La Femme de la Biche was never printed as a stamp, and I was not able in the archive at the Musée de la Poste find any reference or image of what that would have been. However, there is a Cinderella that was popular during the exposition that does show a woman and a deer, and I am just suggesting that perhaps that the intended design might have had something to do with this. Of course, there were questions raised about the lack of a design competition and the additional costs and the likely popularity of new designs. But remember, David promised that the cost of the stamps would be covered by profits from the exposition. Okay, so Le Pot de Fleurs, this is the only one that does not have the printer and designer's name at the bottom of the stamps. This is what a sheet of 3 panes, and I do own a copy of a full sheet of each of the stamps issued. I bought these at from a Paris auction many years ago. I've never seen any reported since. Occasionally you'll see a single pane, but not the whole sheet of 3. Here is a trial color proof. Because this was intended to fulfill the UPU printed matter rate, then understandably the color is green, as was typical of UPU printed matter rate stamps at that time. There was a thought of having a 25 centime value for this in blue and green. This is a maquette or an essay for that. This is the final color combination. And sometimes the vignette green and the frame green are almost imperceptibly different. They can be very subtly different. Issued April 29th, these are first day cancels at the Exposition Post Office, demonetized on December 1925. So you can see it's really quite a stylized vase with a, so looks like maybe a stylized passion flower. I'm trying to guess what that might have been intended to be. There are some varieties. It is known in perforate, and here's one with diagonal perforations, horizontal perforations. It's also known, misperforated to the degree that it looks like it is a 5 centime stamp rather than a 15 centime stamp. And here is a cover that I have that has one of these misperforations where it looks like a 5 centime and 2 other 5 centime stamps. The domestic letter rate at that time was 25 centimes. So this was correct, a 15 and 2 5s. But here is a 20 centime postage due, which would be correct if in fact this were only 15 centimes of postage. The fact that all of these are canceled at the Exposition Post Office leads me to believe that it was a contrived cover, that it was done with the complicity of the postal clerks. Maybe never even made it through the mail. I can't really tell that, but anyway, that's a little oddity with this particular stamp. The 25 centime architecture stamp. I have photographic essays in which the tablet at the bottom actually has a script inscription of architecture. It also shows workers and different building profiles. Otherwise, though, it's pretty similar to the actual stamp, which we see here. The script of the République Française and the 25 centime value are different. The flower garland above the tablets is different. And this is one of several color proofs that were produced at this time to try to figure out. Remember, this is not a UPU rate stamp, and so there was no necessity to have any particular color on it. And just as the same was true of the 25 centime Potter stamp, there was a consideration of producing this as a 75 centime value. And here is an essay with the regular design, but with the inscription in the value tablet. It was issued on June 11th. So that was actually during the exposition. This is an example. I have a couple of examples that are actually postmarked at the exposition on June 10th. And again, I am not convinced that these are not like contrived, or in cahoots with the postal clerk. One other thing that I would add is this is the only stamp. You see the building shown here. That actually is a good representation of one of the buildings, actually 4 buildings on the fair site. So that this is the closest you could really come to having something with a maximum card would be that image on it. There are no consistent varieties in this stamp. I have one where the urn here is on the second step and instead of on the base above the tablet. I have not, in looking at complete panes, have not seen this as a constant variety. Then you get other things like, paper folds, perforation paper folds. Okay, that same design was used for the postal card. And again, because this was intended to fulfill the UPU international postal card rate, it is colored in shades of red. And here is an example of the card. This is one thing that I was able to determine in the Musée de la Poste archives. It was issued on June 27th. There were only 53,000 printed. Here is a frame essay without the background. And then here is the earliest observed use that I have seen of June 29th. And not only that, this is the only example that I have seen that was used to a foreign destination during the period of the 45 centime postal rate. Because remember, on July 16th, postal rates increased. And so 45 centimes is no longer enough. You had to have 60 centimes. And so you see a lot of these cards with a 15 centime stamp added going to foreign destinations. But this is the only one that I have seen ever with the correct 45 centimes in that basically 2-week period before the rates went up. And this one is addressed to Magelang, Java in the Dutch East Indies, has all the receiving marks on it, and one of the prizes of my collection. I'm not sure that there are any constant varieties in the postcards. There are some varieties, but not absolutely sure that any of these are constant. This is a possible one with a break in the 5. I've seen that in a few cards. The deformed 4, I've only seen in 1. Oh, and then background shifts, those are really common. Here, the background has shifted, so you have a light area here and some crowding and overlapping of the background with the design. Okay, and the last of the stamps that were issued were the torch design, which is both in 10 and 75 centimes. And again, this is only a month before postal rates go up, so the single-use 75 centimes are not, terribly common. 2-color typography. This is for years in the catalogs, it listed the designer as somebody named Schmidt. And the more of these I got, I thought, that does not look like Schmidt. That just does not. And I blew it up, I looked at it, and I found a dictionary of artists. And I just started going through for SCHM, and I found Francois Louis Schmid, who was a Swiss designer, and was able to see it is in fact F.L. Schmid. So that was a correction that I was able to make. The 10 centime actually does have varieties, some of which have been reported in the literature for since the 1930s, including a light area in the in this yellow block here, a green line in the frame here, and a white spot under the A here. And these are all, and again, because I have the complete sheet and some additional panes, I have been able to identify where these occur on the particular panes in a consistent manner. The 10 centime does not have any similar varieties. So there are some other things that we see. Here's one where the background color is displaced considerably. And then a couple, this is one I showed earlier, a couple where the perforating, the comb missed the top row of stamps. This is one that I have found, white dot in the 0. I have not seen this in more than just one example. And so I don't think it's a consistent variety. The broken 5 is another one that I have not seen. It looks like it should be a consistent variety, but I have not found it to be that. Okay, well, right, you know, after the stamps were all produced, the French Post Office issued a collective proof, which is a very large sheet with the control perforations in it. They had done something similar to this for the Olympic set in 1924. The Olympic ones are very scarce and very expensive. The decorative arts ones are not common, but they are not that expensive, and really quite beautiful things. Okay, let me just kind of run through some of the postal history of these. Domestic letters originally were at the 25 centime rate, shown here. And then as of July 16th, they went up to 30 centimes. So here's a July 20th letter that somebody tried to pass off just 25 centimes in postage. And I love this one because rather than a French postage due stamp, they used one of the decorative arts stamps with the T and triangle for tax as the postage due stamp. Foreign letters, again, the 75 centime stamp was before the rate increase was perfectly sufficient to send a letter anywhere in the world. This one going to Bombay. And then after the rate increased, then there were all kinds of imaginative ways of decorating your envelope to meet the 1 franc rate. Domestic registered always required more than 1 stamp. And a lot of times, you know, people would be able to, here we have the 85 centime. This is the earlier rate period. And here is the 1 franc 5 centime later rate period, all done with the decorative arts stamps. Foreign registered, formerly the registration fee was 75 centimes. Here's one going to Mexico City. And then it increased, not only did the postage rate increase to 1 franc, but so did the registry rate. So here we have a 2 franc franking going to Bogota, Colombia. And here's an example of the registration label from the Exposition Post Office, where they use that little straight line print that I showed you earlier to mark the registration labels. Special delivery or express, you know, also underwent a change with the increase in rates. Here's a domestic one at 1 franc 60 centimes, and then here is a foreign one going to Milan at 2 francs 25 centimes. And there's some odd uses of the decorative art stamps. One thing that was kind of an interesting coincidence was that the pneumatic post, which had been around in public use since 1879, that the letter rate to send something through the, basically a telegram through the pneumatic post was conveniently 75 centimes. And so here is an Art Deco stamp used to pay the pneumatic or telegram rate. And then here is a beautiful block or a series of these 15 centime stamps on a parcel receipt. Well, the 1920s were also a time when commercial airmail began to take off, so to speak. And here are a couple of experimental flights from 1925 to Africa, French colonies in Africa. The one on January 9th, going to Zinder in Niger. Only 20 covers were flown here. I don't mind that mine has a crease in it. This is number 8 out of the 20. And then more common are the beautifully decorative ones going to Chad, to Niamey. And these, you notice that the 25 centime domestic stamp, of course, this is the first issue that came out in December of 1924. This was before, these were experimental flights. This is before they started figuring out, like, we need to be charging more for airmail. And so they did. And during this time in 1925, there were to foreign destinations, there were airmail supplements required. 25 centimes, for example, to the Netherlands and Britain. And so here we have a registered letter with the 75 centime UPU rate, 75 centime registry, and 25 centime airmail to Rotterdam. And then here we have one that is actually printed papers. So it is the international printed matter rate sent by airmail with a 25 centime stamp to London. Well, I mentioned that at the end of 1925, all of the decorative art stamps were demonetized, and which of course didn't keep people from using them. And here is one going to Haarlem in the Netherlands, where appropriately, in France, only the 25 centime current stamp was canceled. The 2 decorative art stamps were not canceled, and this is in 1926. And so, and then the postal clerk in France marked the T for tax. Well, on arrival in the Netherlands, they applied postage due stamps. And similarly, an example going to Switzerland, where this stamp should have been canceled. These should not have been. These were not. That should not have been and was not, and then was taxed 50 Swiss centimes when it arrived. Okay, back to this. Now, I want to close by sharing with you a poem published in L'Echo de la Timbrologie. And this is about the Arts Décoratifs stamps, okay? And you can see there are a lot of exclamation points here. And my French is very poor. This was published in June 1925 during exposition. By this time, all of the issues had come out. And the translation of this is this. So the writer was certainly not a fan of any of the stamps, although he does not single out the potter decorating the vase. But, you know, by what mystery art thou then so ugly? To raise the taunts of the world. To what bad miscreant do you owe your existence? Vignettes of low art. Traitors to fatherland, art, and nature, thou art not French. That's probably about as insulting as it could be. So in the philatelic press, they did not receive the appreciation that I think that you know, philatelists who were using them or collecting them had. So that's the end, and I do want to say that you know, ATA, I checked the ATA topical checklist. So architecture has more than 24,000 listings in 20 different categories. Art has almost 44,000 listings in 37 categories, and that doesn't even include the ones that are artist specific. And so don't forget to check your ATA checklists and see if maybe there are some architectural or artistic stamps that you would find interesting. Well, thank you.